Hello and welcome to WoWs Operation Replays. This is your host, Lord Holland4293, and today I am bringing you a very special, spawn point video, or positioning and attack video. Now, this was actually brought up to me by Hyperfish from Wolf 1 Clan. Now, he put this on my Raptor Rescue spawn point guide that I posted a couple weeks ago. And it was very well received. Now, he was asking, he doesn't play, ops often, so having a guide that tells me the ideal place to put my planes would be of great benefit. Okay, so I saw that and I made this for him. So, what we have is I broke down the British, American, Japanese, German, and Soviet carriers into attack lines and vectors using the feedback that I received that it was very, confusing and everything with me drawing it. So I made sure to make the maps already so I could then illustrate them for you. Now, for our code, we have, I'm sorry that the orange is, I messed up on the first one. So orange, ignore the orange on this one. But pink is the movement, green is the positioning and waypoints. And I have it divided into evac 1, 2, 3, and 4, with the evac colors being, evac 1 is dark red, so right here. Evac 2 is purple, evac 3 is red, and evac 4 is yellow and gold, basically. Now, as you see now, most carriers, it's pretty easy. The first part I didn't really put onto it because it's very easy. Most when you start as a carrier, American, so let's say you start out as Lexington. Now, another community contributor, or not community contributor, but a YouTube commentator said that, a carrier should spot the DD. No. Operations for CV is about damage farming and getting damage, and getting kills, because that's what's going to give you the XP to get from tier 8 to tier 10. And that's an easy super container. So you want to go for damage and DDs and just what helps you attack. Now, we're looking at the Americans. Now, first off, this one here works for Ranger, Lexington, and Enterprise. Now, for Enterprise, or for let's say you start out as Lexington. You want to go for the battleship first, the Fuso here that spawns on the A line here, so A6, A7, and you want to focus him down, because he's going to take the longest to get down. Because everyone can kill the DD and the cruiser real fast. The battleship is what takes the longest and costs you that, and makes it hard to get that kill 3 ships in 1 minute. So attacking him and getting him down to like 30,000 damage, or taking 30,000 off of him, that's good damage for a CV. So go for the CV. Or the battleship. Now, for the second part, I didn't put this in on my guides because I figured it would be, common knowledge. But you usually want to send, after the Fuso goes down, you want to spot up around C5 or C4. If your planes are detected at C4, that already tells you that the enemy spawn is already down on the J line. So that's good. Now, so let's say you move your carrier to waypoint 1. As a Lexington, you can choose to use your rockets and your bombers, but make small attacks on the cruisers. Those will whittle down your planes real fast. Now, let's say that your team completely fumbles and you're in an Enterprise. Enterprise can handle the cruisers. But I did some testing with Enterprise yesterday in training battles. And under near perfect circumstances, Enterprise bombers, AP bombers, can citadel the Shokaku straight through its flight deck. 85% of the time to 90% of the time, 95, at least over 90% of it, you're just going to get normal pin damage. But with this RNG and lucky bomb strikes, you will go through those citadels. go through the flight deck, through its deck armor, through its armor plating, and hit its citadel. So you can citadel it with Enterprise under near-perfect conditions. It's very difficult, but you can do it. But I would definitely not recommend going for the carrier in American carriers. You just don't have the striking power. Now, the primary goal for American carriers is to support your task force, determine the enemy position, cruisers, attack heavy ships like battleships and carriers, rockets and torpedo bombers, mostly battleships and cruisers though. Torpedo DDs, so like the DDs that spawn on the one line with the carrier, those will be great DD, those will be great XP. So it equals great XP and it helps your team. As a carrier, you need to learn how to torp DDs. That will be amazingly important and very helpful if you want to take carrier gameplay to tier 10. And in torping DDs is something that every carrier player should know how to do. Now, let's go to waypoint 2 and then let's head to evac 1. So up here. You usually want your planes to at least focus around here where this first line is, because the crewed cruisers right here is going to spawn and they're going to attack the Raptor as it goes up. That's in-game or game over situation 1. If you kill that, Raptor basically has a straight shot to make it to the evac point. Now, if they don't spawn here, there's going to be the cruisers and the battleships there. Battleships are like the Congo and the Nagato are your primary targets. But assist in the cruisers if your team has got the battleships. Now, I've done some testing, and I've noticed that if there are ships down here by the southern CV spawn area, I've noticed that the cruiser pain train does spawn, consisting of the Azuma, Mogami, Furutaku, and Aoba. Now, I've had that happen where I've seen a Bismarck down there, I've been down there in my Massachusetts, and the spawn train happens. I'd have to confirm that, but it could be a correlation between the cruisers up here and being down here triggering the spawn train. I'd have to do some more testing, but it does seem like there's a correlation. Now, let's assume you go for waypoint 2. So you're going to put your carrier right here on this island at C4. That's your optimal position after going after the DDs. Then you're going to strike south and attack the cruisers and the battleships. That is your primary damage. If your team is having trouble with the carrier that spawns and goes up to the 1 line, or the A line, you can go for that carrier. But only go for the carrier if you absolutely have to. Because the fighters and everything, you're not going to get a huge amount of strikes off unless you can bait those fighters into attacking your fighters and then launch your attacks. Doable, but it takes some skill. And like I said, under near perfect circumstances, without CVAA, you can do it, but the Shokaku does use AA, so you're going to lose your fighters and you have to kill his fighters. So you have to ensure you have plenty of plane reserves. But definitely in waypoint 2, you're going to be attacking the cruisers and the battleships. Now, for waypoint 3, that still goes to the same area as waypoint 2. That one's a very easy one. You're basically going to attack the battleships and the cruisers that spawn along the 1 line. If the cruiser pain train consisting of the Mogami, Furutaku, Aoba, and I believe a Mayoku or Tago spawn here, coming down through the C5 area, you can launch small attacks on that, but just be aware you will be losing a lot of fighters. That's why I emphasize making, if you know you're not a good CV player, make tiny small attacks. Drop like 1 fighter, drop like 1 flight, try to make 2 attack runs and then call them back. Or make 2 attack runs and then call what's left back. You're at least maximizing your return and getting some damage throughout the entire match. And with the Americans, it's very hard. Tier 6 carriers can do still pretty good, but you have to understand the operation and manage your planes really conservatively. And Lexington has been really neutered for a long time. Now, she's not as great as she used to be, so you have to keep that in mind. But she's still a good carrier. Now, for spawn point 4, that gets real easy. You're going to move to spawn point, or waypoint here, down here at H4.5, and then you're going to send your planes out to, like, see if the Fuso spotted. The Fuso or the Congo, whichever one spawns, and attack that ship. Now, there'll be a DD there. You can go for the DD too and take him out. But if this battleship spawns, then it's normally a very good guess that you're going to be making your second strikes here at J1 or J3 and 4. Because there's 2 cruisers there. Those cruisers will initiate game over mode that I illustrated in my Raptor spawn point guide. Killing those cruisers is protecting the convoy and supporting your task force. Now that's why it's important to always have a significant amount of plane reserves left over to achieve this. Because you don't know where your team's going to be, who's going to die, or what's going to happen. Now let's assume that the Fuso doesn't spawn. Okay. Then that leaves the ability to still have 2 spawn points. There could be the battleships that spawn up here at on this G2 line, or G1 and G2, or it could still be the pain train cruisers. Now, if the pain train cruisers spawn here at J3 and J4, then you've got 2 battleships that will come up from the south in that same position around J2 and 3. Those 2 battleships will kill the carrier. So you have to be aware. And that's why it's important to just do minimal damage, but keep your planes ready for the last half, because you don't know what's going to happen. If, let's say, the Fuso and the pain train cruisers don't spawn, yes, launch small attacks on the battleships, but there'll be cruisers that spawn on the one line, and will move towards the 2s. Move to like I2. Those are your primary targets as the carrier. Those guys will kill the Raptor. And Torp. So you got to be aware of that. Same as the cruisers that spawn here up in B7. They will Torp and kill the Raptor. So you have very special attack points that you have to fulfill as a carrier. So, and carrier gameplay and operations is very demanding. It is not like sit back and farm damage. You have very specific tasks you have to do to fully accomplish the goal of attacking. And that pretty much brings up the main position of Americans. The Americans are fairly, average. They're not great, but they're not bad. Now, we're going to go to the Japanese and Germans. Now, this is a little bit more cut and straightforward, so I improved it on the second one. Now this works for the Ryujo, Shokaku, Graf, Zeppelin, Kaga, and the German tech carriers in the strat, because the German techs don't have a lot of health. They're pretty low health, but they do get heals, so you want to be aware of that. And so the attack style emphasizes fast strikes with a few losses. So you want to make hard-hitting attacks. So you want to go for the Fusos, for the battleship Fuso, get that high damage, but have minimal losses. So it takes some practice. Now, the carrier gameplay is to do lightning fast attacks to do quick damage with very little losses. Your key targets are DDs, cruisers, and battleships. Avoid CVs as you lose too many planes. Now, I did do some work with Shokaku and training battles, and I tried to AP Citadel a Shokaku with a Shokaku. Not going to happen. And the same thing with Enterprise. You can AP Citadel it, but saturation starts to kick in after a while. you'll be doing maybe 6 to 8k salvos at first, but then the saturation of the flight deck kicks in, and you're basically kaput. It's going to take more attacks to kill it, so it's very difficult. Now, for best results using German and Japanese, you want to use proximity fuse for torpedoes, torpedo bomber for improved arming distance, and improved engines for your speed. Now, of course, the exact same strat that we covered, attack the Fuso, spot for the cruisers, and make small attacks is absolutely important. And then you're going to go to waypoint. So you're going to go to this waypoint island right here at E4 or E7 right here. Sit on that island, and you'll be protected from cruisers that come up from the south. They will shoot you, but you'll have enough health to at least protect yourself on that island. Now, that island is very important in later strats, for sure. And then after that, let's say spawn point evac 1. You're going to move your carrier to the exact same position. You'll spot to see if the cruisers spot at B7. If they don't, that usually tells you that it's going to be spawn points on the 1 line. And then if they are, then you're going to use your lightning fast attacks to attack the battleships and attack the cruisers. It's pretty straightforward. The AP bombers are good, and the torpedoes are great for both. But just remember that if you go for the cruisers and you're in German CVs, remember to use your AP rockets. I know rockets have been kind of neutered, but a little bit of chunk damage like 10k, 4k, 6k, it all adds up, and it all helps your team. So remember to use rockets on the cruisers, torps on the DDs, and AP bombers on the battleships. And the same for Japanese. Use your torps on the DDs. It should only take you, with the way Op DD health is, it should really only take you about 2 passes. If you can get 2 torps on the first pass and then maybe 1 or 2 on the second, that DD's gone. That spawn on the 1 line. So that is great XP and everything, but I absolutely do not advise going for the CV in these carriers. You could try making fast attacks. You might be able to pull it off with the Graf Zeppelin because the torpedo bombers are so fast. You can speed drop 1 flight, zoom out, and then drop a second one, and then repeat and repeat and repeat. But that's the only one I would really try to do. It would try to snipe CVs with. But it would take you so much time that you could go after other ship damage. So it's not very recommended. Now for waypoint 2, you're going to park your ship on that island at D4, and you're going to go for the same strat. Go for the cruisers with your AP rockets and your torpedoes, and then save your AP bombers and torpedoes for the battleships. Pretty straightforward. And then whatever you have left, there'll be those cruisers that spawn at H1 and H4 and 3 at the 5:30 minute mark. And that is your last bit of damage. So those are great little bits of damage. Mostly surface ships will take that, but you can try to do it. You might be able to get like a 20k to 10k salvo or strike on it before they go down, but you can at least try to get some good damage. Again, Raptor Rescue comes down to knowing the spawn points and knowing how to attack. But, waypoint 2 or evac 2 is pretty simple. Waypoint 3 is like the same. Now, you don't move up to this island on waypoint 3. You stay here with the Raptor, and you're in a good position. So you can make long-range attacks. So you're going to go up. I know I had the red line go here, but you're going to approach it around the island at 2.5 and attack from the side on. But you're going to attack those cruisers and the battleships easily. If the cruiser pain train spawns, and you still got a healthy amount of AP bombers and torpedo bombers for your Japanese, put everything you've got on those cruisers. Get them down. I don't care if you lose planes, because at that point, the op's practically over. There's not much damage left. If you're low on damage, by that point, go put everything you've got. Your rockets, everything. I don't usually want you to use rockets in your Japanese ships. You can use them to help spot ships, but that's all they're really good for. And then if you're low on like torpedo bombers and AP bombers, use your rockets to give time for those squadrons to recover. Just a little bit of time, so you can keep launching strong attacks. Now, waypoint 4, it's pretty easy. You go down to H5, spot for the Fuso. If the Fuso's there, then it gives you a good idea that the 2 cruisers will spawn. If there's no Fuso, then you've got a 50-50 on the battleships and the cruisers. If the cruisers spawn, you know you've got 2 battleships. If the battleships spawn, then you know you got 2 cruisers, and the cruisers are your primary targets. If your team is, like, say, completely dead, still go after the cruisers, and then throw your ship into harm's way. Try to give the Raptor some time to get out. Turn your ship into a torpedo and ram. If you can get a damage control off one of those battleships, like a flood or an incapacitation, then ram it. If you can take one battleship out by ramming, you're like one of the few on your last year team, it's worth the risk. Most carrier players in Ops don't throw their CVs away. It's important to understand that to throw your CV away if you're going to try to complete the op. Sometimes drawing fire for your objective ships like transports or Raptor is very important, and people forget that. And then after that, do whatever you can. If you're still alive, you try to get that last bit of cruiser damage on those cruisers that spawn at 5:30. So for those that don't or didn't see the first video, so let's go to spawn points on the evac 1. They spawn here at D1 and D4. Spawn point 2 is in the south, so they spawn on H1 and H3, 3.5, somewhere right in there. Now spawn point 3 is the same. They spawn here. Spawn point... Oh wait, sorry. No, sorry. Cruisers in the south are on spawn point, or on evac 2. Spawn point 3 is actually different, since those are battle... No, wait, sorry. Sorry, yeah, I'm sorry. I goofed that up. The cruisers on spawn point 1 are at H1 or E1. No, D1, sorry. Cruisers at spawn point 1 or evac 1 are at D1 and D3. Spawn point 2, since it's the battleships, they spawn at C2 and C3. Spawn point 3, since they're coming from the north, oh, I keep messing up. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, folks. Spawn point 1, evac 1 is D1, D3. Spawn point 2, H1, H3. Spawn point 3, C2, C3. Number 4, H1, and G2. I'm so sorry I messed that up. I'm terribly sorry. I just had a brain fart. Now, that pretty much covers the Japanese and Germans. Their playstyles are super similar, and it's all about maximizing your strikes with very minimal losses. And that's pretty much what it comes down to. And that's typical gameplay for any carrier. But for the Germans and Japanese, it really takes over. Now let's jump to the British. Now the British, where it gets kind of interesting. The British have a completely different kind of play style. Now, of course, you always go for the battleship that spawns first. Then you try to spot the cruisers. You can make small attacks with your torpedo bombers on the cruisers, but save your ships. Now, this works for Implacable and Indomitable. Now, the playstyle for these British carriers is very time demanding. Since Implacable and Indomitable don't have the best plane regeneration time, you have to really conserve your planes. You have to maximize your strikes with damage over time, DOT, and then with high alpha attack run. So if you're landing like 4 torps out of maybe 4 torps out of a squadron, and then getting like 3 planes back, that's a pretty good turnaround. For HE bombers, you usually get about like 8 bombers per squadron, and usually want to like maximize those squadrons. Now for Indomitable, it becomes very difficult because she only gets very few. She still gets the slingshot ability for 4 bombers. So there's a hard chance, but it also allows you to do some interesting things with Indomitable. Same with Implacable. And this is where, while I said you don't attack the carriers in Japanese and German, or in an American, you could actually do that. But it's as a last resort. The bombs on those ships have 32 millimeter pin. And the deck armor on Chkalov is only 19 millimeters. So you're pinning the bow, or pinning the deck. Now I did this in training battles also, under near perfect circumstances. Limited fighters and then a limited, stationary ship. No AA, nothing. No planes. I was actually surprised that near perfect runs and drops on these carriers could do about at least 10 to 12,000 damage. Now with Indomitable, that could actually go up a lot higher. Because remember, you can slingshot with Indomitable. You can bring all your squads in, pop the first strike, bypass most of the AA, and drop the second strike, and then repeat and repeat. Now that's why for best results, I put flight bomber control, because you want those increased bombers if you're going to try to do the CV snipe. And then sight stabilization for better engines, and improved engines for better speed for all your squadrons, since the British don't have the best speed. So you really want to conserve your planes and just be aware of that. Now, for Indomitable and Implacable, these carriers are damaged over time. And the majority of your targets are big, slow battleships and ships that are able to be damage stacked. So cruisers, DDs, and battleships. Do not go after carriers, unless it's a last resort. So let's say the team fumbles the British carrier, the carrier that spawns, the southern carrier that spawns in the south. And that carrier, goes to J1. You could easily, if it's going to be, like one of the spawn points in the south. So I don't recommend this in a carrier, but if it's going to be one of the northern ones and that carrier gets away, like spawn point 2 and 1, you hypothetically can move your carrier to very aggressive positions if you're going to try to do that. The island at H4 or F4, right here on that, where it gets really flat, at the top of like F3.5 right there, that is a perfect spot to go for a carrier if there's not much left and you have some covering fire. If you want to do it the other way and you're pushing your carrier into, like, say, from evac zone 2, and head down the one line, you can do that too and get your planes off faster and attack with your bombers. That is a very viable option. Now, again, if it's evac 1, you want to make sure the DDs are, the cruisers that spawn on evac 1 are taken care of. If they don't, then that lets you know that the battleships and the cruisers are spawning. But if the pain train, occurs from the south, remember to use your bombers on ships like the Furitaka, the Mogami, and the Aoba. The 32mm plating can be pinned by your bombers. And then you can use your torpedo bombers and like rockets on the Azuma. Since Azuma is a more heavier cruiser, it has better armor. So you want to be aware of that. And then for evac zone 2, for the battleships that come from the south, your first strike wants to be against the cruisers that spawn up, and then send everything you've got on those battleships. Like, if you attack the cruisers and you see battleships that are down there on the J and I lines that are coming up, get those cruisers down as fast as you can. Because if you do that, that's going to make it so much more, easier for you and your team. I cannot stress that, enough. Now, for spawn point 4, since you're in British carriers, again, spot to make sure that the Fuso is there, and then attack the cruiser pain train. But if it's no battleship and it's just the cruiser pain train, the battleships are coming. And you can focus one of them. I would recommend focusing the Congo. Since Congo doesn't have the best armor, your 32mm bombs will do great damage to it. You can go after the Amagi if you want to for more damage, but remember, your damage over time carries. You need that damage over time to really stack up. But if you're in, say, Indomitable, you've got to perfect the slingshot method. Now, if you were going to do the slingshot method and you're really comfortable with it, I would say absolutely go for the carriers. If you're that comfortable with the slingshot method, go for the carriers. Because you can kill those carriers real easily and fairly quickly if you're a good enough carrier or Indomitable player. But, the British are they're good ships. They're very forgotten ships. Now, the reason I didn't put the new ship, Colossus, in there is because Colossus isn't available to be tested is only available to be tested by CCs, and I don't have it yet, so I don't really know where to put Colossus in as a British carrier. I don't know if it's going to fit with the Japanese, Americans, or Russians, or British. I have no idea where it's going to, so I have to get that ship to see where it fits in. Now, when I get that ship and test it, I will add it to the chart. Now, for the last one, and this is where everything deviates completely. Everything deviates completely. Now, this works with Chkalov and Phobeta. Now, of course, the color code, pink is movement, green is waypoints, and orange is carriers. That's the first difference. Again, all the evac colors are the same. For best results, proximity views, sight stabilization for better aiming, aircraft armor, and bomber flight control. Those are what you really need to make these carriers work. Now, your attack style, high priority targets, battleships, and carriers. You can go for cruisers if you want to. But, again, at the very start, attack that Fuso with everything you've got. Remember, damage stack, damage stack, damage stack. These one strike carriers do a lot of damage, but you've got to get those bombs on. And a key point is, Soviet carriers have high alpha attacks that are attacks that are sustainable over a long period of time. You have to learn to have that sustainability over a long period of time. And then key point, understanding how to use each squadron is paramount in being a successful Soviet player. So rockets. people will normally use torpedo bombers and their skip bombers, but they completely neglect the rockets. The rockets are one of your best bread and butter attack planes for anything. Stationary battleships, cruisers, but mostly carriers. A Phobeta can Citadel a Raptor on Ultimate Frontier, and the way it attacks, it does not take you long to take out the Raptor on Ultimate Frontier with a Phobeta. It doesn't. Use your skip rockets to get it moving, Citadel the living daylight out of it, and then skip bomber it and rocket it, basically, to death. Very easy, very quick, and that CV suffers painful. Now, the exact same thing happens on Raptor Rescue. Most players would go for the cruisers after the battleship. I say no. If you're in a Chkalov or a Phobeta, your primary targets are to attack the carriers. A Phobeta, and I know a lot of people are like, oh, Soviet carriers, why are you taking my damage? Well, Soviet carriers can excel at this. And it is very possible to sink these carriers with very limited losses. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So what we're going to do is let's say we're going to move it to this very special island at 7.5. So if there's cruisers coming from the south, you'll be relatively well protected from them. You'll still take some damage, but you'll live. Now, I will put in a link in the video to how to snipe for the Chkalov, because I have done that in Chkalov, and the same thing basically applies. I run through it with the Phobeta attack style on it, but I'm going to run it through again. So what you want to do is first you want to send out your rocket planes. And so the carrier comes up along the tin line and kind of turns into this island at G8. You want to get those rockets firing, so they kind of shoot the upper deck part of it, so it sets off the fires. Then after that, you can follow up with your skip bombers or your rockets. If you've still got plenty of rockets, go for your rockets. If you time the rockets right and hit the strikes right, you'll do at least 12k damage. And then the rockets will then hit, or the bombs will hit and set fires. Pretty easy and very easy to do. And then pretty much you just keep pounding that carrier away with long range, with those rockets and skip bombers. Now, learning to drop beyond range is very important, because Soviets emphasize that is learning to drop beyond the flak range. But for skip bombers, the bombs are best at attack line 2 and 3. Mostly 2, but if you're going for the carrier, skip bomber will work on number 3. You can try number 4 because it is the narrowest and you can get some good damage, but just be aware that they're most accurate at number 2 and number 3. Now, after that, you want to go for the carrier that spawns on A1. By that time, your team should be settling up around where everything starts to converge at E6. Okay, so you can strike that carrier, and since you're the only one spotting it, you'll just destroy it before they even get a chance. Unless there's like cruisers or TDs that head to kill it, then you can avoid it. Now, let's assume, of course, as normal, that the evac point goes to E1. Again, same type of play stuff. Spot the cruisers, kill the cruisers, make sure they don't kill the Raptor. If they don't spawn, then that usually tells you that there are battleships. Now, okay, then kill the battleships and the cruisers. Go for that, absolutely. But if you've successfully sunk both carriers, you'll be looking at least 80,000 damage for both carriers. That's a ton of damage for Soviet carriers. So that's why I emphasize attacking the carriers with Soviet ships, because you will get such incredible damage. And it's just fun to do it because it takes a lot of skill. Most people can't pull that off in a carrier, especially Soviet carriers. So if you can pull that off, kudos to you. I've done both. I've sunk both of them. But unfortunately, I don't have the footage because I wasn't creating content back then. But I can rest assure you that I have. And I don't lie to my viewers. I don't. My friend Devil Dog was playing his full beta, and I told him that he could snipe the Southern CV. He wasn't comfortable with it. But he went for the second CV at A1, and he killed that carrier before the team had the ability to really snipe and do anything. He was going to go for the Southern CV, but we ran out of time. So he has proven that he can snipe. Now, if you want to message him in port and ask him, go ahead. He will back me up. Again, spawn point 1, battleships, cruisers, and make sure the Raptor is safe. So let's go to spawn point 2. You're going to attack the cruisers and the battleships. That is your primary damage. Now, with Chkalov and for beta, you're going to be wrecking those battleships. I would recommend that if you can get 100,000 damage on those battleships, that's what you should be striving for in a Soviet carrier on those battleships. Absolutely strive for 100,000. Same thing with the cruisers that spawn if you're on evac point 3. Go for the cruisers and the battleships. Now, for the cruisers, I recommend using rockets and skip bombers. Mostly skip bombers because you can set fires, you can break modules, you can just blow into bits because the skip bombers will just set fires. And if you rinse and repeat, you're going to just rack up the damage. Now, if you're in a Chkalov, it becomes a little more, since you only get the small bombers for DDs. But if you're in a Chkalov, let's say the spawn is at number 1. The evac is at 1 and 2. Send out your DD killing bombs to kill the 2 DDs that spawn on the 1 line. That'll be some good damage along with your skip bombers. Again, kill DDs equals more XP. So it's all about knowing the ships and what gives you the most experience. And then for spawn point evac 4, or I guess we're still on evac 3. For the pain train that comes south, rockets, skip bombers, throw everything at it. At that point, yes, there's still the reinforcement cruisers that spawn at the C2 and 3 line, but your most damage is going to come from those cruisers and the carriers. So you don't really need those last 2 cruisers, actually. Now, for spawn point 4, again, spot the Fuso or Congo, see what's going on, hammer them down, focus down the 2 cruisers, and if there's no Fuso, focus the cruisers, and then the 2 battleships. If the battleships spawn, launch some small attacks on the battleships, attack, and then go after the 2 Aobas with their skip bombers and rockets. Go after those, light those guys up, kill them. It's very easy. You'll be surprised at how easy Chkalov and Fobeta get when you start using them. They are extremely easy, but they're also some of the best. It's one of the funnest carriers that I have enjoyed playing. As far as carriers go, in terms of op gameplay, I would honestly rank Fobeta and Chkalov as my number 1 carriers that I have played, that I enjoy. Now, for seconds, I would actually put the British as my second. And then third would be the Americans, with the Japanese following up, because the planes are just so squishy that it doesn't really, they're just, it's kind of like, I just don't really like them. And I tried to love the Germans. I really tried, but I just couldn't love them. Now, I loved the Wazer at tier 6, but I wasn't a fan of the Augusta, just because the planes were so squishy. Now, yeah, but, I mean, for a recap on Soviets, attack the battleships, attack the carriers, get those high damage alpha strikes. That is the gist of the Soviet carriers. Now, I will be making battleship guides, cruiser guides, and DD guides for the ops. Now, those ones will be a little bit more easier because those get divided into two categories. DDs, light cruisers, heavy cruisers, and slow and fast battleships. So those are going to be a little bit more easier to make. But I'll try to have those out. I'll try to get like at least one review for the lines out a week, because I have to hand make all these maps and hand draw everything. So it takes me some time, but I will get those out at one point. So this is Lord Holland 4293 signing off. Again, like and subscribe on the channel. It really helps me out. And please like and subscribe, as I will be applying for the community contributor program. And I am currently in the process of filling out a very detailed application. So any likes, comments, subscriptions, everything helps me out, as I want to be one of the first community contributors that devote solely to operations. So that is my final message for you, captains. I will have this up tomorrow. Take care, folks.